Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of GTO Good Old Boys. Be sure to hit like and don't forget to subscribe.
What's up, guys? JD here at Waterfront. Welcome to GTO Good Old Boys. And today, we're going to talk about springtime bass fishing. Here before me, we got some simple baits, just ones that you can focus on just to kind of get out there, depending on what the fish are doing, and get you some springtime bass in the boat. So, in the springtime, you got a lot going on. You got bass moving into spawn, you got shad moving into spawn, and of course, you got them moving out, moving out toward your deeper water where they're going to spend, their summertime and whatnot. So, all these baits here are baits that we carry at Waterfront, and I'm just going to dive in. We're going to kind of start with the ones that are kind of on the fast-moving sort of things, to where you're more looking for fish or getting reaction bites, and then we're going to slow it down into some of your more pressure situations. Like I said, just slowing down on them days that you don't have all that wind. So let's start up here, guys. First thing we got, having some fun here. This is the River to Sea Whopper Plopper in the loon color. Springtime's when you can really start throwing some top water, especially if you want to get that one bigger bite. A lot of tournaments in springtime, a lot of the times a big fish is caught on top water, even when it's kind of on some of them colder temps. So this is a whopper plopper here, guys. You're going to throw this bait around docks, over grass, around areas where they're spawning, or around lay downs. And this also speaks, for a buzz bait too. So any of your top water moving baits, springtime's a good time. Once that water gets up in the 60s, some people even make it happen when it's colder. But it's definitely time to start thinking about top water. Of course, we got more top water baits we're going to dive in as the video goes on. So that's your whopper plopper there, guys. And then we're going to go over to another, right at top water, more of a subsurface bait. This here is a Dirty Jigs tackle, no jack swim jig. And whether you're on the Coosa River or on Guntersville, around Hydrilla, Primrose, whatever kind of cover you're around, which is obviously stuff they're going to spawn around, a swim jig is a great tool. No matter how thick it is, it's a weedless option. You can take a 3.5, 4-inch swim bait, put on the back of it, or you can take a crawl, such as a Zoom Z crawl, super speed crawl, any kind of crawl, lay it sideways, help keep that bait up in the water column, and just give you some really aggressive reaction bites with the swim jig. Then we're going to kind of go to something that's going to kind of shine as the shad spawn starts getting going. This is a War Eagle spinner bait. Usually just any kind of white, shad color, chartreuse and white. This one here has a gold and a nickel blade. Depending on where you're at, your water clearly is going to kind of show you or tell you the kind of color of a spinner bait you're going to throw. Sometimes I'll leave it without a trailer. Sometimes I'll throw a trailer hook on there. But just like a simple fork tail, very small, slender split tail trailer or grub will go really good on a spinner bait. Then we're going to go back into full top water. And this is the 6 cents Vega frog. It's a frog I really like to throw. The reason being, it's got a cup nose on it, so you can pop. It does throw water. But with its narrow design and keel, it also walks very good, has a good hookup ratio. So I'll throw this a lot around lily pads, really shallow vegetation, and of course, around areas where they have just got done spawning. Then we're going to go over, kind of backtrack a little bit. We're going to go to a jerkbait. You really can't ever take your jerkbait box out of the boat. We think of it as a premier late fall, wintertime bait. But anytime you're fishing in the presence of bait fish, a jerkbait is always something you want to have on deck of your boat. A lot of tournaments, in that March, April time frame, still a lot of fish get caught on jerkbait if you looked at events in the past. So this is a Stunner 112 and the Stealth Shad. This is one of the top selling jerkbaits at Waterfront. So come give it a try. Even this time of year, I'd have one on the deck of the boat. Anytime you got fish chasing shad, the warmer the water gets, later on in the summer, you'll have some schooling going on. So it's always handy to have a jerkbait in the boat. Then back to covering water. So we've got a square bill here. This is something that kind of applies to any lake. Whether you're on, the Coosa River, Tennessee River, it does not matter, because a lot of times the fish will use causeways, they'll use lay downs, they'll use docks, they'll use all kinds of stuff to kind of stage in and around the spawn. A square bill is a way that when you're practicing or covering water, you can just really find fish fast, find cover fast, figure out what kind of grass you're around, if you can't see it. So a square bill, it's a 4x4 bait, rip wrap, any kind of hard structure. Always want to have a square bill tied on. Then let's talk about a big bite. So we got two things here to get a big bite, because a lot of times when the fish come off the bed, even before they want to go, they want one big easy meal. This is a 6 cent draw here. So on lakes like Smith, Guntersville, when you have some clear water, you got some deeper boat docks, deeper, lay downs and stuff, you can throw this around that structure. And it's also another bait to help you find fish. A lot of days, even if you're not getting fish to commit to this bait, they'll come out and look at it. So if you're maybe not wanting to catch those fish that given day, you can, speed it out of a dock, pull fish away. When you see the fish, get it away from them. It's just a bait to help you find fish or get that one big bite. Coming back in with another big bait, this is the 6 cent Whale swim bait here in Pro Blue. So we got another bigger size bait to help get bigger bites. Usually I'm going to put a 6/0 or 7/0 keel weighted hook on there. This swim bait, any big swim bait in general, this time of year on Guntersville, when them fish start coming off the bed and get back on, relating to the grass edges again, it's a good way to get you a big bite in the boat. Of course, you can throw it around causeways, bridges. Once again, even if you are on some deeper, clear lakes, you can throw this around, deeper boat docks. That's a good option to get bigger bites in the spring. Then, of course, we got a couple more fast baits here. Then we're going to slow down. So, obviously, you got to have a vibrating jig, especially on Guntersville. It's a handy bait, really, all the time, all the way from pre-spawn almost all year long. This is a bait that I'm going to throw. There's kind of no loss to this. Usually I'm throwing it where I can rip it out of grass. I'm putting a 4.5-inch straight tail or fork-tail trailer on it. I'm either going to try to barely reel it over the grass and tip the top of it, or I'm going to really try to get it down and trigger a reaction bite, just kind of depending on the give and mood the fish are in. And there's days where the fish are really, if they're more lethargic, they don't want the chatterbait, that's when I'll actually take the swim jig we talked about earlier, and I may just take a swim jig with a swim bait trailer and kind of work it slower through those same areas that I would throw a vibrating jig. Then another fun one here. This is the head-in super spook. So most of you know what this bait is. As soon as that shaft spawn, gets started going up, or as soon as I start seeing bait at the surface early in the mornings, I'll always have a spook or a popper tied on, some sort of walking topwater hard bait. What this will do is, if the fish are real active, busting on shafts, a quick way to get a limit in the boat in the morning. So I'll be throwing this areas to where, boat docks, once again, areas where I think the shad are going to be spawning, whether it's on a grass edge, a hard gravel, hard rocky bank, anything like that, I'll have me a spook tied on. And now it's time to slow down. We got a lot of soft baits here. So we're going to be talking Texas rigging, wacky rigging, Nico, shaky head, a lot going on here. So springtime, always time to throw a lizard. This is going to excel either on a Carolina rig or a Texas rig with a 3/16 ounce weight. You can go a little heavier, fishing deeper. But a lizard is just a great way to slow down and get fish in the boat, especially on days where you don't have a lot of wind. This is something I'm going to throw, like I said, on a Carolina rig, anything, any depth off of a grass edge. It might be 6 to 8 foot, might be 10 to 12. But this is also a bait that I'll peg on a Texas rig, and I'll throw it up really shallow. Or if I have people fishing with me, it's just an easy thing to get people throwing out there and catching fish. And you can just slowly work it through the grass. Then this is a fluke. So once again, this is a bait that you put a lot of fish in the boat on. You can actually use this bait to put as a spinnerbait trailer or a chatterbait trailer. But what I like to do is just take a 3/0 or 4/0 worm hook or EWG hook, and I'm going to rig this weightless. And what I'm going to do is, this is a bait that I primarily throw this bait, around the shaft spawn. A lot of times I'll use a spook or a jerk bait. But if I'm around a lot of thick grass and there's bait fish getting blown up on, I can rig this weedless and I can work through the grass like a jerk bait or close to the surface like a topwater bait. Then the big bopper. So big bopper, paddle tail worm, speed worm, there's a lot of different terminologies to this. But this is kind of one of the easier techniques to catch fish on. I'll also put this on a Texas rig with a 3/16 ounce weight. If I have to get it down, if the grass is real thick, I may go to 1/4 ounce. But there's a couple of different retrieves here. You can rig this or fish this just like a worm, up and down vertical through the grass. Or you can, give this to someone and say just slowly reel it through the grass. Slow down and get you some bites. This is a bait that's going to put numbers and bigger fish in the boat. And this is the Bama bug color here. But really, any dark green color, or on the other end of things, any like red bug, plum color, that's what we sell here at Waterfront is a lot of your reds, a lot of your greens. And for like shaky head, Nico rig, that's one thing is a Nico rig. We talk about wacky rigging a lot, but a Nico rig is a way to kind of get your bait a little bit deeper. Sometimes, if you're targeting fish, it might be spawning in a little bit deeper part of the water column. You can see them. It's a good way to get the bait down there. But Nico rig, it's just kind of from now all the way to the fish are moving offshore, on their ledges. This worm right here on Nico rig or shaky head will put a lot of fish in the boat. Obviously, the max scent technology, fish seem to bite that and don't let go. Then we got the Yum Dinger. So this is primarily going to be a bait that I used to wacky rig. This to me is just in everything, numbers and size. There's a lot of different brand of stick baits. But the Yum Dinger, it kind of falls slower than some. So a lot of times, if you're fishing real shallow, it'll work better for you. But Senko's, you can Texas rig this bait where it's completely weedless. You can Texas rig it with a weight. Or my favorite is just putting a wacky rig on it. Of course, we sell a lot of different wacky rig hooks. You can put a weighted wacky head on it if you want to skip boat docks and stuff like that. All the baits we just talked about here, guys, can be found here at Waterfront or on gunnerstackle.com. Thank y'all for tuning in to this episode of GTO Good Old Boys. And once again, I'm JD at Waterfront, so come see me, and we'll find the stuff that you need to get you on the water and catch some of these big springtime bass.